Hello, random person. Korean sex?
Do we even?
Final answer. Hello, random person. Sab Nino here. Guess what month it is? You have 3 seconds. It's October! The time of year where you can dress up, get candy, and embrace the weird and scary. For the most part, it's a fun holiday with tons of great memories. But on the other hand, it can lead to trauma. Unfortunately, I've had my fair share of traumatic experiences. Sometimes on Halloween, sometimes not. But most of them, A, happened to me as a child, and B, come from Nickelodeon. So I wanted to count down my top 7 Nickelodeon traumatic experiences. First off, a few rules. Rule number 1, they must be from my childhood. Rule number 2, no fan art. They must be official creations from Nickelodeon. And number 3, not all of it has to be from the shows. I count bumpers and stuff on Nick.com as well. So let's begin, starting with number 7. This traumatic experience is probably the tamest out of all of them. I was 5 years old with an ear infection, and I was watching the SpongeBob DVD, The Seascape Capers, which might be the first time I've ever watched the show. One of the episodes on the DVD was SpongeBob meets the Strangler, and there were a few scenes that irked me. The first scene was when the tattletale Strangler drew SpongeBob on the back of a car seat and brutally scuffed it. The second one was every time the background switched to purple. The intense music, dark shading, and the way the Strangler put his hands on SpongeBob freaked me the f*** out at the time, since my brain was like, oh shit. If he did all of that to the car seat, I could only imagine what he could do to SpongeBob himself. Thankfully, this fear got better as I got older. And the initial reason why I feared this episode eventually became why I appreciate it. The way they portray the Strangler as a legit threat not only gives this episode a unique atmosphere, but makes SpongeBob's accidental foils to his plans even more cathartic. Number 6. This traumatic experience I've had when I was 7. I was watching the SpongeBob episode Scaredy Pants. But for a while, I wasn't made aware of its sister episode, I Was a Teenage Gary. This happens with a lot of holiday episodes of shows. Due to how unfrequently the episodes air, it leads to the second episodes it pairs with being unknown about. For instance, it took me a while to see the SpongeBob episode The Paper, due to the first segment being Valentine's Day. Anyway, the episode started off fine. Nothing scary or unnerving, until SpongeBob turned into a snail. I was terrified of his transformation, and for some reason, something was just unsettling about his design. I just hated looking at it. So for a while, I would change the channel every time it came on, which wasn't often. Thankfully, this fear was short-lived, since around 8 or 9, I watched the episode just fine. Number 5. The hardest part about this list is simply remembering what freaked me out and what didn't. Sometimes I even forget scenes that I was disturbed by, which almost happened with this entry on the list. In May of 2006, they premiered the episode of SpongeBob Ghost Host. Weirdly enough, there were quite a handful of scenes that freaked me out in this one. The first one being Squidward's face after SpongeBob repeatedly hit him a couple of times. The second one is when Squidward's mother melted, and the freakiest scene of them all, both instances when a SpongeBob projection's eyes slithered out of its sockets and bugs came out. Every time that scene came on, I would always close my eyes in horror. To be honest, I don't remember how any of these fears were cured, so I'm just going to assume it was a simple case of maturity. Number 4. This topic is actually partially lost media, so I have to be really creative when describing this one. In 2007 to 2008, Nickelodeon had 2 Halloween events, Shocktober and Shocktober 2. They went all out for these events, with the flash games, the episode premieres, and most importantly, the bumpers. The bumpers for this event were legit intense and spooky. And they even made original art for it. For instance, SpongeBob was Frankenstein, Gary was a dragon, Plankton was some Megamind monstrosity, and Aang was a skeleton. However, one of them freaked me out for a short period of time. But unfortunately, I can't find it, so I have to create the visual. There was one bumper that showcased Cosmo and Wanda as flies. They had big soulless eyes and weird looking mouths. I hope that one of these days, these bumpers get found, because there's a ton of interesting stuff in them. Number 3. In 2007, I got Atlantis Squarepants on DVD. It was a standard DVD, but on the back of it, there was something unexpected. It came with a separate disc showcasing a sneak peek of the Mighty Bee, a show that I don't think was even being promoted on the channel at the time. I put it in and it showed the full pilot. I honestly enjoyed it until the scene with the dog show. When the judge was deciding which dog won, it was revealed that Portia's was in fact a rat. This scene freaked me out a ton, and Portia's freak out afterwards didn't help my fear either. Looking back, I think the fear was justified. The rats in the show are the freakiest shit to come out of it, and I want all of them dead. Despite this less than ideal first impression, I still watched the Mighty Bee. A ton, actually. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I even rewatched it on Paramount Plus and caught up with all the episodes I missed. It's no masterpiece, but I really appreciate the show for providing something different for the network at the time. Plus, it probably helped modern SpongeBob get its identity. If you watch The Mighty Bee after watching the newer seasons of SpongeBob, the humor, music, and animation is so similar, it's almost uncanny. Number 2. In 2008, there was a SpongeBob premiere block during the summer. I was having a blast with it. I loved whenever the show had week-long premieres like this. Nick used to hype them up so much that almost every kid in the playground knew about it. They mainly aired season 6 episodes at that time, and one of the episodes they showed was House Fancy. So the thing that freaked me out the most was when SpongeBob absorbed all the blue paint. Yeah, no, it was the toenail scene. Did you really expect anything else? It's one of the most infamous scenes of the show, and everyone and their grandma knows about how gruesome this scene is. It was the first episode I have ever hated as a kid, and I even warned my neighbors for a short period of time. However, after my third viewing, I eventually got used to seeing it. Nowadays, I still hate the scene for how morbid and gory it is, but I think the rest of the episode is overhated solely due to this. It's actually a decent episode if you look past it. It's definitely not perfect, but it's far from the worst episode in the series. Before we get to number 1, I want to discuss some honorable mentions. These didn't make the list due to either not impacting me as much, or due to not remembering if I was traumatized by them. Ghost SpongeBob from Ghoul Fools. This unnerved me when I first saw it, but after my second viewing I got used to it, so I didn't think it was noteworthy to be included on the list. The Fairly OddParents episode, Betty Bye. The episode was pretty tame until we saw the gross close-ups of a sleep-deprived Cosmo and Timmy. It was super weird to see, since FOP wasn't known for its gross close-ups. I didn't include it because I simply can't remember if I was scared of it or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if I was. Jimmy Neutron's Men at Work. Just like Betty Bye, this episode was tame until a certain point. The McSpanky's restaurant was eventually taken to space, where it was invaded by aliens, and the episode ends with the restaurant being all destroyed and creepy. I didn't remember if I was freaked out by this either. Maybe I was just irked by it. In the Mighty Bee episode Hivejacked, there was a scene where Bessie was freaked out over what will happen to the hive due to Portia staying in it, which led to her going insane and repeating, "When everything's changed, I can rebuild." I also don't remember if this one freaked me out, but given my past experiences with this show, I wouldn't be surprised. And for number 1, this one is pretty oddly specific, so before I explain what it is, I have to give some context. On April 28th of 2022, El Supersonic Q made a video where he discussed lost Halloween bumpers called Nicktoons Zombified. They were rumored to be 4 bumpers: the Fairly OddParents, Fanboy and Chum Chum, the Mighty Bee, and SpongeBob. Fop and Fanboy had short clips, and the Mighty Bee one had a super unsettling screenshot. Since I want you guys to sleep tonight, I won't show it. In August of the same year, all of the bumpers were found, and the SpongeBob one turned out to be a rumor. Or was it? Even though SpongeBob wasn't featured in a Nicktoons Zombified bumper, that doesn't mean SpongeBob wasn't zombified. And coincidentally, it happened at the same time those bumpers were airing on Nicktoons. In the mid-2000s, there was an online world on Nick.com called Nicktropolis. However, when Nickelodeon rebranded its logo from a splat to orange text, Nicktropolis was rebranded to Nick Club. Both Nicktropolis and Nick Club are lost media, and have no two towns rewritten equivalent. But in October of 2011, Nick Club had a Halloween event called The Night of the Reanimated. It was a survival game featuring Nick characters at the time being featured as Halloween-themed creatures. One of the penguins was a vampire, Chum Chum and Patrick were werewolves, and SpongeBob was, you guessed it, a zombie. And him and the game were given a pretty unsettling title screen. I was scared of this title screen and the zombified SpongeBob for weeks. The red background, the muted color scheme, everything about this was pretty spooky to my 11-year-old brain. When I played the game for the first time, it made my fear even worse, since all the creatures were shown as question marks with silhouettes. So for a while I didn't see what he looked like in-game. There was even a creature named SpongeBob, which I was also pretty afraid of before I saw it. I was just afraid of the unknown, since the game just came out. But once I actually played the game, my fear dwindled down, and now I honestly look at this memory pretty happily, since it's a core memory of my childhood that not a lot of people have even heard of. So those were my Nickelodeon trauma stories. Did you relate to any of them? Were there any fears relating to Nickelodeon that you experienced? Comment below. Happy Halloween, and it's all Sab from here.